All right, so let me share my screen. I've got a presentation for you guys on intermittent fasting. And I need to go to the beginning of the presentation. All right, so if I could get you guys to mute your phones or computers just for a few minutes. Like I said, I'm going to go through these slides. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask me anything at all. This is really just a presentation to help and support individuals. First and foremost, you just get some information about what intermittent fasting is, as well as if somebody is interested in pursuing this, they'll have some background information to help and support themselves. So having said that, welcome to a little bit of information about intermittent fasting. So that's me, I'm a health coach. That is my web address, wlscoaching.net. Feel free to get in touch with me if you'd like. Disclaimer, of course, I need to say that I am not a physician. I'm not a registered dietitian. This is information that I am sharing based on a couple of books that I'll share with you in just a minute. Probably 90% of this information was out of these two books that I'm sharing with you, as well as anecdotally with myself and my experience with intermittent fasting. If you decide this is a route that you'd like to potentially pursue, please make sure that you have proper medical advice from a physician, registered dietitian, etc. Please don't sue me. All right. So I'd like to share my story about, well, a lot of you know my story just about whole food plant-based, but there is a little bit of a story as it relates to intermittent fasting as well. In high school, I weighed consistently 155. I mean, I was maybe 154 some days and 156 some days, but I ran track, I ran cross country, and I'm 5'9". I weighed 155 pretty much even Steven almost the entire time in high school, and most of the time that I was in college as well. And as I got more into my adult life in my 30s and 40s, my weight crept up to over 190, 191-ish or so about 18, 19 years ago. Actually, there was exactly 18 years ago because my son David, who's now 19, was 1 year old when I realized that I was significantly more weight than I weighed in high school. I did a number of different diets. I did Atkins, did a number of different things, and nothing really stuck per se. And about 5 years ago, I found out about a whole food plant-based lifestyle, how you could reverse heart disease with it potentially. I was concerned because I was having a lot of chest pain, angina, and I thought, well, this is something I want to pursue. And so I did. And really within about 6 to 12 months, but officially 18 months, I weighed 155 pounds. So I'm like, well, here I am. I basically had lost about 30 pounds because I wasn't at my all-time high at that point in time, but I lost about 30 pounds. And I'm like, okay, this is my weight and this is the weight I'm supposed to be. And then I found out about intermittent fasting. And I thought, I had a neighbor friend of ours who was doing this, and she was not eating breakfast. And she was sharing with us that you could lose weight in doing this. And of course, I was very naive. I was very ignorant to intermittent fasting. I'm like, well, it's because you're eating one less meal. Of course, you're having less calories, and therefore you're going to lose weight. As it turns out, I found out that you can actually eat the same amount of calories, but if you do it in a time frame that's more like intermittent fasting, i.e. shortened windows of eating, you actually can lose more weight. And I'll explain how that is in just a moment. So it's not just less calories, although most people that do intermittent fasting do in fact consume less calories just because they eat till they're full and they stop eating. With intermittent fasting, went on my whole food plant-based, I was 155 pounds. And when I found out about it and learned more about it, I decided to go ahead and try and experiment myself. And all I really did was 2 or 3 days a week, I would not have breakfast. I'd have a cup of coffee, black coffee, because I knew you could have that, and that would help me with my hunger. And I weighed 155 pounds probably for about 6 months. And about a week to 10 days later, I weighed 149 pounds. And 2 weeks later, I weighed 146 pounds. And then I got down to 144 and I was like, oh my goodness. And the only thing I really did differently was I was running a lot at the time, but I was also intermittent fasting. And that was really the biggest difference with what happened to me. So this worked for me as far as losing weight, if that was my intent. Today, I weigh about 150. I do intermittent fasting most of the time, and I'll explain that in just a moment as well. But my balance is about 150, 149, 148, 151 or so. So that was really kind of another lever, another tool that potentially my clients could use if they wanted to pursue that. And I have had a number of clients that have used intermittent fasting, some of which it did not help them at all and they were miserable. And some of them it helped a great deal if their goal, in fact, was to lose weight. As I shared with you before, these are the two books that really helped me. I read the one on the left when I was getting into intermittent fasting and learning a lot about it. This book has got a ton of information about all kinds of fasting, the history of fasting, etc. Excellent book. And then one on the right, I purchased last week digitally and went through that book as well. A lot of the similar information on that book. And I actually have a page from that book to share with you, which Dr. Furman wrote, who's one of our plant-based icons. So what is intermittent fasting? Ultimately, and there's different kinds, but ultimately it's kind of a shortened eating window. So normally the American male is going to get up and they're going to have a cup of coffee. They're going to have some type of breakfast, probably not a very healthy breakfast. Let's say it's 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And then at midday, they're going to maybe have a snack, a coffee that's got lots of sugars and yucky stuff in it. At lunch, they're going to go out with their buddies from work at lunch and have a big lunch. They're going to have a snack at 3 o'clock. Maybe it's a piece of fruit, maybe it's some peanuts. And then at dinner, they're going to go home and have a big meal at dinner. And then don't forget at 8:30, they're going to have a big bowl of ice cream as well. So that's pretty typical, as you guys are well aware, maybe not always those snacks, but that's pretty typical of how we eat in America, right? 3 meals a day, lots of snacks, probably not so healthy. In this scenario of intermittent fasting, it doesn't really discuss necessarily what you're eating, but the time frame that you eat. So you could intermittent fast in that exact same scenario if you just eliminated the breakfast and maybe the 8 p.m., 8:30 ice cream. So that person is starting at maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock, they're eating, and they're going all the way until, let's say, 6:30 or so, right? So their window there is an 8-hour window. And then the other times throughout the night when they're sleeping, in the morning when they're usually having breakfast, they're not eating at all. In fact, they're fasting. So intermittent fasting is just a shortened window. Just a real quick story about how we evolved as humans. Now, these people, I think that guy on the right there is eating a piece of meat, but ultimately, again, this isn't about what you should or shouldn't eat. This is about the time frame. Many times went by back in the days as we evolved as humans, where we did not have an ample supply of food, and highly caloric food at that, as we're well aware. A lot of the folks, as they were, 100,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago, as the humans were evolving through evolution, were going many days without food. And then, of course, they would gorge themselves because then they would have the plants or the animals or what have you to eat. So our actually bodies naturally evolved over time to intermittent fast, just out of necessity, because that's how we evolved as humans. So these are some different types of intermittent fasting. And again, I don't want to get into the specifics of, okay, this is what this is, and this is what this is. I'm just going to talk about the first one, which is the 16-8 method, which involves daily fasting for 14 to 16 hours, restricted daily eating window to 8 to 10 hours, where you can fit 2, 3, or more meals. Again, you can still have a number of meals, but it's just in a shortened eating window. And as you can see on your screen, there's a number of other diets or fasting periods, the warrior diet, the alternate day fasting. Primarily what I'm talking about is the first line when I talk about intermittent fasting. And ironically, it's via skipping a meal, which is the last line. It describes skipping a meal fasting on this slide as a non-structured intermittent fasting plan. This involves skipping meals spontaneously. When I intermittent fast, which I do today, I skip breakfast, and it's not spontaneous, it's by design. So I guess I would be on the top one, but that's in fact what I'm doing, is skipping a meal. So how does it work? So this is, I'm going to take a little bit of time in this, and after I'm done with the slide, I'm going to open it up to ask you guys if you have any questions about it, because this is really where the magic happens, okay? This individual is fasting, intermittent fasting, and they're having 2 meals a day. As you guys can see, they're having lunch and they're having dinner. And those red mountains are their level of insulin that raises when they have something to eat. And when your level of insulin raises, your fat storage capacity in your body increases as well. When you stop eating and you go into a fasting state, which is the very small green valley in the middle, but then you can see the huge ones at the right-hand side and the left-hand side, insulin levels are low, and therefore your fat burning capacity. And that's why you can have the same amount of calories, but you're burning and losing more fat when you do that. Again, in this scenario, an 8-hour eating window, 16 hours of fasting, this individual is skipping breakfast. They're having lunch, let's say at noon, they're having dinner at 7:30, and they're done by 8 o'clock. And they're not having a snack in between, because you can see the value of fasting there as well. So when you fast, your insulin level is going down. So you're not eating food. And so you don't need to have insulin to be released, because the food is, let's say, glucose or calories. The insulin level is raised to take that glucose and put it into the cells so your cells can burn that energy. But when you're not eating and you don't have that caloric input in your body, your insulin level is low, and then your fat burning happens, okay? That's the essence of really what's happening when you go through extended periods of fasting by burning the fat. Any questions about this slide?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a specific time that's better than another time in terms of the fasting?
Yes, there is a better time to fast. According to Dr. Greger, Michael Greger, he says if you're going to do intermittent fasting, you're more successful if you eat breakfast, have a good sized lunch, and skip dinner. You're still going to have success if you eat breakfast, eat lunch, and skip dinner. I'm sorry, if you skip breakfast and have lunch and dinner instead. But more people are more successful with the skipping of the dinner, because when you go to bed at night, typically you don't want to have all this food on your stomach and you're burning. I don't know why it works better that way, because it's still the same amount of time, but it's supposedly, that's what Dr. Greger had reported. I watched a video on what he talked about it today as well. Yeah, so really good question. You're going to have success probably either way. Now, a lot of people can't do that, right? Some people literally have to have dinner at night, and some people have to get up and eat something in the morning. They just can't fast in the morning. So obviously it's not for everybody, but for me, and with my lifestyle, I want to have a good sized dinner. When my wife comes home to work, I want to have a good meal with her. And so that just wouldn't work for me with my lifestyle and the way it's set up in my household. Skipping dinner for other people may be perfect for their lifestyle and what they want to do to manage that. What other questions about this slide or anything else regarding intermittent fasting?
Well, the other question, this is not a question, it's just a comment. Why in the world has my diabetes docs and dietitians not talked about this to me?
I don't know. You know, I was thinking some people that take insulin, it promotes the fat storage in your body, right? And so
Yeah.
I know that certainly is a common challenge with individuals that are diabetics that take that or what have you. And that kind of confirms this chart kind of confirms what's happening. Now, you still need insulin, obviously, and that's why it's being released. And that's why it's being injected into the individual that needs to take it for diabetes. But that's basically, in essence, what's happening.
Well, I will ask my doctors why they've never suggested this when I see them again.
Okay,
Okay.
I've got a question, if I could.
please.
In other words, like if I eat breakfast, like say 8 o'clock in the morning, and then stop eating whatever, maybe I eat breakfast, a light breakfast, and then a large lunch, which is what I tend to do. And then as long as I quit eating by 4 o'clock, then fast overnight until 8 o'clock the next morning, that'd be like 8 hours, and then with the 16, but it's not really in the same situation. I have a hard time skipping breakfast because I go for my morning walk, early in the morning. And I thought, well, by the time I get done, sometimes I'm hungry, sometimes I'm not.
Right.
And, but the main thing is to eat more of your calories in the morning and at lunch, correct?
That is exactly right. You nailed it.
Okay. But I could quit like about 4 o'clock and still be okay.
You sure could.
Okay. That's kind of what I've been doing. I've been having pretty good success with that. Except sometimes at night I just get hungry and blow it. But progress, not perfection.
Yeah. And I've got a slide about that as well, but that's a really good point. Definitely. What other questions about this slide or anything else related to intermittent fasting?
I have a question, Mike.
Mhm.
So when you're eating, when it shows the 2 meals over the 8 hours, does it matter if it's, I know like calorie doesn't matter, but if you're eating like 3 or 4 smaller meals within that window, or do you really need to have like two big meals?
My understanding is a great question, Andrea. My understanding is it doesn't matter because your insulin level is raised and you're not burning fat anyway. So some people will say, well, I really want to have this Cliff Bar or what have you, because I've got a sweet tooth. And I'll usually say, well, why don't you have it right after lunch, because your insulin levels are raised anyway. So they don't necessarily have to have it 3 hours later if they can still avoid that. But yeah, if your 8-hour eating window is, and you have, 4 or 5 smaller meals in that period of time, it shouldn't matter as much, just as long as when you fast, you're truly fasting and not getting any calorie input with the fasting period.
And do you know, like medication, if you have to take medication twice a day, will that be enough to where it messes up the intermittent fasting, that you should try to do it within that 8-hour window, or does it make a difference?
So are you saying the medication you have to take with food potentially, or just in general?
Nope, just in general. But
Yeah, it
if,
shouldn't matter, just as long as there's
okay,
no calories in the medication.
okay.
Yep. Anything else? All right. So what meal to skip and why? We kind of already addressed this. You could skip lunch, right? You could have breakfast and you could have dinner, but it kind of counteracts what you want to do for those long periods of time where you don't have increase of calorie intake. So your best meals to skip would either be breakfast or dinner. So you have that long period, 15, 16, 17 hours where you don't have any calorie intake at all. And again, like we mentioned earlier, per Dr. Greger, the best meal to skip would be dinner if that's possible. So tips to fasting to help with hunger. You can drink water, you can drink unsweetened tea, and you can drink black coffee. There's low to no calories. I think one large cup of coffee is like 4 to 5 calories. One average size cup is about 2 calories. And so because you're not really getting calories in, your insulin level isn't raising, right? And I don't know if I addressed this on the next one yet. So for me, my typical MO is I do this a number of different things in the morning. I write in my journal, I exercise, I do X, Y, Z. And by 8 to 8:30, I'm pretty much done and I'm ready to start my day. It takes me about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And when I start my day, I usually start with a couple of cups of coffee over the course of a few hours. That helps me because it gives me a little energy, but it also helps with my hunger. And I'm really not that hungry anyway, but the coffee certainly helps. And then I start my first meal usually around 12:30. Sometimes it's as late as 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I eat typically until dinner. Sometimes after dinner, I'll have a piece of fruit or what have you. But that is a routine that I'm doing consistently for the last several months, Monday through Thursday. And that's worked really well. But that's a way that you can still get a little bit of sustenance, i.e. some energy from a unsweetened tea or water or black coffee. So what about a small snack? So I've talked to individuals who are like, I'm doing the intermittent fasting, Mike. I don't even have my lunch until 1 o'clock. And I just have coffee, blah, blah, blah. And then I start asking a little further questions, and they've got the oat milk creamer in their coffee, or they've got, a little bit of half and half in their coffee. And again, that even just 10, 20 calories is going to start going to boost up your insulin level. In fact, if you have stevia in the raw, if you have, the pink stuff, the pink sweetener, NutraSweet, all that stuff in your coffee. So artificial sweetener gum, it's going to raise your insulin level because your body thinks that you're getting sweet stuff and it needs insulin. And when your insulin is raised, you're defeating the whole point of the fast. Even a piece of fruit, again, very healthy. If you're hungry and you need a piece of fruit, please have that piece of fruit. However, just know that you're breaking the fast, which is counteracting the fat burning process. So was there a question? So what to eat when you break your fast? So this is probably pretty self-explanatory, but I want to include it because of what Susan mentioned a little while ago, right? So there's health promotion foods. And again, most people on this call are really doing the best they can to have a plant-strong or a plant-based diet or lifestyle, I would say, versus some of the other things that are out there, which is a lot of the processed foods, which have a lot of calories and high density, a lot of animal products, et cetera. So you have to decide what makes the most sense for you as you're trying to get as healthy as possible. But just know that when it's time to eat and you're hungry, you want to make sure you're making good, conscious decisions of what you're fueling your body with. And for me, it's kind of a double positive. I go through the quote unquote pain of getting to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which is not that big of a deal. Believe me, I'm a wuss, so there's not that much pain. And when I get to 1, then I'm having a huge bowl of oatmeal with tons of fruit and avocado toast. I'll throw in some more fruit. I mean, I'm really eating a lot of food, and it's absolutely wonderful, and it's incredibly healthy as well. On your screen is the slide from one of the books, like I said, from Dr. Furman, who talks about, and he's big time into the non-starchies, right? So he really talks about what you can eat liberally after you finish your fast. Of course, he talks about raw vegetables, cooked greens, non-greens, beans, legumes, tofus, lentils, fresh or frozen fruit. Limited, eat in moderation. Again, this is just my opinion. There's a lot here. I think you can continually eat plenty of whole grains, cooked starches, vegetables, quinoa, corn, potatoes, avocado, dried fruit. Of course, you're not going to want to eat tons of that stuff, but there's still a lot of healthy stuff in the middle there. And I don't necessarily not eat that in moderation. I eat a ton of it as well. And then I think on the right-hand side, things like ice cream, butter, milk, barbecue, processed meats, vegetable oils are things that he says that are off limits. Again, we want to be in a place where we're making good, healthy, conscious decisions. And I have been here as well, right? It's not that common anymore, but there have been times where I'm just so hungry, and I think we probably have all experienced this, that we don't make good conscious choices. And this is one of the caveats that I have with this process. If this is something that you're considering, put yourself in a place where you're successful and you surround yourself with healthy, good food choices when it's time to eat. If you don't, you will probably potentially make some less than healthy choices and decisions. So caveat, is it safe? So there are some indications that are not recommended to do intermittent fasting unless you have doctor's orders where you can experiment it or you're followed or tracking it. One of those is diabetics. Like I talked about the insulin peaks. It's incredibly important to make sure that you're all over and understanding what your levels are, et cetera. Somebody can go into a hypoglucose area where it's pretty scary, and that needs to be tracked and maintained. You know, a lot of people are very fascinated with food and they have an eating disorder, and this is not necessarily recommended for somebody that's experimenting with this because they're trying to lose weight or what have you. Obviously, pregnant women, it's not recommended for children. And it works so well that you don't necessarily need your blood pressure medication after a series of weeks if you're fueling your body with healthy foods. So if you're on blood pressure medications, make sure you're letting your doctor know, just like on all these scenarios, and you're monitoring your blood pressure on an ongoing basis as well. Recommendations. So my recommendation, if you want to go ahead and try this or you'd like to learn more about it, certainly feel free to reach out to me to talk to me about it if you'd like to. Obviously, my recommendation is to make sure your doctor is well aware if there's any chronic health conditions, et cetera. You really want your doctor to be aware and give you recommendations as well. You can start slow, i.e. skipping breakfast or dinner one day a week. And a lot of us do that because we're so crazy busy as it is anyway. But potentially that could be something you can just experiment with to see. And like I said, there's a lot of ways you can do this. A lot of times people have every morning at 10 o'clock, you know, they'll have their sweetener coffee, or they'll have their piece of fruit, or they'll have their nuts in the afternoon. You could experiment a little bit with intermittent fasting because you have a little bit more sustenance at lunch and then you skip that snack. And that's just another way that you can do that to get your insulin level to go down. You don't necessarily have to jump in and start not having breakfast, not having dinner several days a week. It could be a way that you just kind of play around with it to see what works best for you. Again, this is a book that I have read and gone through it many times, an excellent resource. Dr. Fung is so simplistic in his message. He also has written a book called The Obesity Code, which I have not read, but I've heard a lot of really positive things about it. So I'd like to now, let's do this here. I'd like to open it up for you guys for questions, experiences that you've had with intermittent fasting, comments, concerns. What do you guys got?
I was wondering, you know, like I'm trying to follow Dr. Esselstyn's diet, but I mean, I fall way short of those 6 greens, you know, like a 2/3 cup serving of greens with balsamic vinegar 6 times a day. So, you know, if you're doing something like that, or even Dr. Greger's dozen thing that he does, you know, how do you get all that food in 2 meals, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's if you're not eating, and I know for sure Dr. Furman talks so much about those non-starchy vegetables, and it's literally 100 calories is 1 pound of non-starchy vegetables. So to your point, Rainey, you have to be very strategic about it if you're going to go heavy on the non-starchy vegetables, which are amazing. I mean, they're incredibly healthy for you, but you're not getting the calorie intake that you need if that's primarily what you're eating. And so that's where you want to include things like your legumes. That's where you want to include things like your brown rice, your whole wheat pastas. Those are all things that are a little bit more calorie dense. And so you're going to be able to have that energy that you need. I honestly couldn't do this, my opinion about myself, if I was going to go the Furman route, which is so much in non-starchy vegetables, because I just would be hungry all the time. And I know it works really well for a lot of people, so more power to them. This way, for me, number one, it's helped me to lose the weight. I've lowered cholesterol big time, and it is sustainable. I can do this and have done it for 5 years.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I couldn't do this. But it's a really good point.
So do you do 2 meals in that 8-minute period, or do you do 3?
Me,
Mm-hmm.
I do too. I have and some of you, it's kind of embarrassing. It's almost 3 pounds of food I have at, and I'm not kidding. I literally have weighed it because it's so much food. It's over 3 pounds when I include the avocado toast, which I do that sometimes as well. But yeah, I have the 2 cups of coffee. So there's really very little calorie intake. And then 1-ish, 12:30, 1 o'clock, I had this. I mean, I can't breathe sometimes after I eat that much food, but I'm okay. I mean, it is what it is. I guess it's probably, I'm just cramming it in there. I'm enjoying it. And then dinner time, I'm pretty hungry, 6 o'clock or what have you. And then I may or may not have a snack after that, but sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Usually it's a piece of fruit. Sometimes it's one of those cookies that I started making here recently, but Grace Ann has just told me that she's given up sweets for Lent. So I think I will as well. So that'll just work out just fine. But yeah, it's two large meals, and I'll for sure the lunch, and then the dinner. I don't go light on my dinners. So I just keep eating. So
And what about drugs? Like, if you do have to have drugs 12 hours apart, with the meal, with food.
yeah, that would interfere with the intermittent fasting. Obviously, you want to take the medication. You want to take it with food. If there's a lot of medications you really need to take with food, so that would be a challenge with doing that. Now you can go 12 hours, so like 8 to 8 or something like that, and that's much better than most people as it relates to how they were just constantly have whether that's 11 o'clock at night before we jump into bed, or 5 o'clock in the morning as we get our sweet coffee because we got to go. So that's a 6-hour window, and you could potentially go with a 12-hour window, but that would probably be the essence of what you could do with having to take medication with food over the course of every 12 hours. Very good question.
Hey, Mike, how long does it take normally to see results with it? So we've tried to start doing like 14 and 10, but it's been, week and a half. So at this point, if I'm not really seeing very much weight loss, does it need to be like the 16 and 8?
It's hard to answer that question, honestly, because it just depends on the person. I mean, there's people that do this 16 and 8 that don't see results at all, right? I was probably more like a 16 and 8, and it was 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, I had dropped like 5 pounds, and there was nothing different. And it's not fair, but the reality is men lose weight faster than women. We all know, and that's just true.
Yeah.
It just depends on the person. But I have had clients, female and male, that have started their meals at noon and finished by 7 o'clock and have had tremendous success. In fact, Miles, who's been on this call and talked about some of his intermittent fasting, he lost 100 pounds, 96 pounds, 97 pounds in a year. And that wasn't the only reason he lost that weight, because he went straight to whole food, plant-based. When he was eating his meals, it was very clean. I mean, he was very, very determined and very driven to get results. So he was popping off 7, 6, 5 pounds a week, plus he was also 29-year-old male that was working out. He had a lot of things going for him as well. But it just depends on the person. And that's why I just like to talk about this, to say that this isn't the panacea of how you can lose weight or should lose weight. But if you're open to it, it might be something that would be, accommodating to do that. So, yeah. What else?
I just found it really interesting, how just the least little amount of food will really raise your blood sugar. That graph was
Right.
enlightening.
Yeah, that glucose goes, even if it's just a couple of bites of food, that glucose is going to go into the bloodstream And then the insulin is going to get released by the pancreas, which is going to stop the fat burning process and probably take a few hours to go low again. Now, granted, if you don't have a whole lot of food, it only goes up a little bit. But if you have a meal, which is typically what we're talking about, is breaking, the fast for the meals, that's where it really shuts it off. And that's where the biochemistry within the body and how that's affected.
Say just 1 cup of coffee, or do you have just 1 cup of coffee in the morning, or more?
I usually have 2 cups of coffee.
2 cups of coffee? Okay.
Yeah.
I just wondered.
Yeah, just black coffee, and most of I just enjoy coffee, and it helps with hunger a little bit,
Yeah.
just extra caffeine or whatever it is helps me.
Coffee or tea, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Anybody else have tried intermittent fasting with success or challenge, failed?
I have tried it different times, and when I can do it, I do have good results.
Okay.
And I feel a lot better as well, and lighter, and
Mhm.
more just lighter in general, and feel more energy, a lot
Yeah.
more energy that way. They claim somewhere, I read this and I don't remember where, that when you give your body a rest from digestion,
Right.
it's really helpful to the body and really improves your energy levels and your gut health and all that stuff. It really helps a lot. So
Yeah.
I've read that, and that's why I have done it quite a bit. I've had some success. I don't know in pounds how that translates, but I have lost some weight
Mhm.
when I am able to do it. And I do the, like 8:30 in the morning, and then try to cut off my eating by 3:30, 4 o'clock,
Yeah.
and then just cut it off. But I eat pretty much what I want to during the day. I don't know if that slowed things down or not, but I'll eat, real sometimes in the morning I'm just not all that terribly hungry, but by lunch and early afternoon then I eat quite a bit, and then I'll shut it off
Yeah.
when I get pretty good and full, and then not eat anymore until the next morning around 8 or 8:30 again.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I do it, and that's what I have read as well, that it helps slows doesn't you're not digesting food 24/7.
Right. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, Susan. In doing research for this presentation, I put it a slide in there, and I actually did not include it. It's because I just didn't feel comfortable. I mean, it said a lot of what you just said. It was weight loss, it was reversing type 2 diabetes, it was clarity of thought, it was energy, it was giving your body a rest, a detox. I mean, all these things, which could be true, but it was like, I didn't want to put it in there like, oh my gosh, you can also do this stuff. I'm not trying to sell it to anybody necessarily,
Right. Yeah.
but
Oh, yeah.
there were a lot of other things on there that were, possibilities to help individuals. And I think just my own, again, this is just my opinion I'm sharing. I think just as we evolved as humans over the course of the last 200,000 years, that's how we evolved. So as we go through those periods of time where we don't just continually cram food in our, in our stomach, I mean, even just 100 years ago, how much differently we ate, right? Now it's just food is available all the time. Most of it is not very healthy for us, right? And it is just a constant stream of food. And that can't be good for our bodies. And I think part of the ways that our bodies respond is things like obesity and high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease and cancer. And I'm not saying that's the cause of all this, but that certainly isn't helpful as well. So if we can give our body a break, to your point, Susan, I think it would be beneficial.
Like I was wondering with your 8-hour window or whatever. So do you have the one meal at the beginning of the 8 hours and then the second meal at the end of the 8 hours, pretty much?
Pretty much with the exception of maybe a snack at night. So it'll be like 12:30, right? And then when Grace Ann comes home, we eat around 6:30. And then I might have some fruit after that or a banana with some nuts around 8 or 8:30. And then that's pretty much it. But sometimes I don't have that either. I'm very comfortable, I'm a little bit hungry in the morning sometimes, but usually the coffee takes the edge off of that altogether and I'm good to go. So,
Okay.
yeah. What else do you guys have? Kimberly, were you going to say something earlier?
I have more of an issue of, I have that, the complete guide to fasting with Jason Fung and Jimmy Moore. And that's when I was doing keto, because Jimmy Moore is really into keto. I listened to his podcast and all kinds of stuff, but I had a hard time getting my calories in because I was so full from my one meal to my next. I couldn't fit any more in there. And I think, that was my issue, was trying to get enough food in, and calories.
It's something that Rainey brought that up as well. Definitely good point.
Yeah.
And were you having like a big breakfast and then lunch, or how was that working for you?
No, I did. I fasted my breakfast, so I would have lunch and supper, and maybe a snack, but most time not, because I just wasn't hungry. But yeah.
And then the next morning you would be just drained because you didn't have enough calorie input the day before, or?
Yeah, or just, and I would do coffee, that sort of thing. And the crazy thing with keto, you can have keto coffee sometimes, like you said, to play along with it, to see, and it has a lot of fat in it.
Yeah.
So of course it held me over until lunchtime.
Right.
But yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
But fat releases your insulin as well. I mean, some people are like, oh no big deal, but you're carbohydrates, fat, sugars, meat, protein, it all increases your insulin levels. So,
and I know Jimmy Moore did a lot of, he started out with like 8 hours on, 16 off, but then he would go to like a day at a time, and then he'd go 2 days of fasting. And he felt like it was a really good, he had a lot of energy from it and more clarity in his mind.
Yeah.
But some people just can't do that. So,
yeah. And so, just to be clear, I am not at all talking about that. So again, I'm not giving anybody any direction to do this anyway, but definitely he lost 180 pounds. I'm reading a story. It's very inspiring.
It is very.
He also went several days where he didn't eat at all. And there's things like water only fasting. Some of you guys might have heard that, where you literally just sip on water all the time for days on end. Again, that's not what I'm talking about. There are some really amazing studies that show how healthy that can be. But that's under doctor's care, doctor's supervision. It's definitely nothing you want to do on your own. Definitely nothing I would recommend without supervision of a doctor. And there are certainly clinics that help and support individuals that want to pursue that.
And it's not sustainable, like you said before, where you do the 6 or you do the 18 or 8 and 16. That's more sustainable. You could do that. Whereas,
definitely.
I mean, we're too social to just not eat with anybody, or, not be in social situations where we can't eat for a couple of days.
Yeah, that would be kind of awkward, just sipping on water while your friends are chowing down. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for me, and again, it's all what I do, some people couldn't do. What I do, some people wouldn't have any problem with it. But for me, this works out really well. And notice I said Monday through Thursday, because that's when Grace Ann works. And it gives me the freedom and flexibility, although Tuesday she's not working out, but it gives me the freedom and flexibility to really do that with my lifestyle at this point in time. On the weekends, I may go without breakfast. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but I don't really think much of it, just because if I can lock into my Monday through Thursday, that just works really well for me. So, but it's got to be
relatively safe to do this. Are you supposed to do it like 7 days a week, or 5 out of 7, or just go with what your body feels? Or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think if you're going to do it, I think you talk to your doctor and you start slow. Like you can just go skipping a breakfast, or if you snack all the time, a way to intermittent fast initially is just to have your meals, 3 meals, right? Because you're not going to snack. You're not going to have anything before breakfast. You're not going to have anything in mid-morning. You're not going to have anything in the afternoon. You're not going to have anything after dinner. That's a way to push the envelope a little bit with not getting your insulin level just to be released all the time throughout the day. Then you could potentially, well, I'm going to skip breakfast or what have you, but that would be under your doctor's supervision, depending on your health condition or what have you. So, but I would say start slow, experiment, see how you feel. In the very beginning, I was just curious, and that's when I did it, 2 years ago, just to say, it was during the summer, I remember, and I thought, let me just see how this works. And I was really surprised at how much weight I lost in a very short period of time when I did nothing differently. That's what was so cool, was I did nothing differently in that time frame. I was eating the same amount of food. I pretty much stick to my same diet or what have you. I was running quite a bit, but I was running quite a bit before as well. So the only difference was it allowed my body to burn more fat in those fasting periods. So I ended up getting down to, I think, 144, which is probably a little too light for me. So, but
What you were talking about, the water fasting, I think, I could have this wrong, but I think Dr. Goldhammer of True North says that you can basically do, without doctor supervision, like one a day or one time. I mean, like one day of water fasting. But if you do
just
more
drinking
than that,
water.
yeah, but if you do more than that, then you need to probably be supervised. And if you're diabetic or whatever, though, that one per day or that one day may be too much, maybe. So
I had not heard that, but yeah, I have followed him quite a bit, and that's when I say there's some amazing things out there about what they're able to do to help people on high blood pressure for years. I mean, it's amazing. What now these people are several days under doctor's care of doing water only fasting, but that makes sense. Very cool. Anything else? All right. Well, listen, guys, I really appreciate you joining and facilitating conversation on this interesting topic. Again, it's another lever. If anybody has any questions later on, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you feel like this is something that you want to dabble with or play around with, maybe that would be something that would help you if that's your goal. So, all righty.
thank you, Mike.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
All right. You guys take care.
Evening.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
I think